So I will not speak about passwords. So I'm not really sure what I'm doing here, but anyway, I'll take the occasion to do a bit of evangelization on permutation-based symmetric crypto. What I will tell is all based on joint work with my Ketchak team colleagues. So that's Guido Bertoni of Microelectronics in Italy, Michael Peters of NXP in Oslo, Belgium, and Gilles is a colleague that works in the same place as me in Zaventem near Brussels in Estimate. So, well, the talk is a bit of an experiment which mixes different aspects, so I hope I'll be in time, but Carl will certainly remind me as I go over time. First I will try to put the framework, what we have now in mainstream symmetric crypto today, and how our work fits in that context. And I'll discuss a bit the SHA-3 contest. And that's a large section about hash function security requirements, which is one of the reasons why we came up with the new construction called the sponge construction, which I will further detail in the section on sponge functions. Then I will go more into detail on the Ketchak sponge function, and finally I will give some applications. So if you go to a course on crypto, or to some PhD, or you read a book on cryptography, or a tutorial or something, you will often see this list. So they will say, yes, in symmetric crypto, we got block ciphers, we got stream ciphers, and in stream ciphers you get your synchronous stream ciphers and self-synchronizing. In hash functions, you have the typical non-keyed hash functions, and you have MAC functions that you can consider as keyed hash functions, but sometimes are also listed separately. And then you have all these modes of use that you can do. So you have, for instance, in block cipher, ECB mode, CBC mode, CBP mode, and so on. So that's what they will say. And what you also often see is just the hash function. That's really the Swiss Army knife of crypto, and you can do everything with a hash. And they always show you this fancy picture. So let's take a closer look at hash functions. So I think most of you know what a hash function is. It's a function that maps any binary string of any length to a fixed digest of n bits, where n is a parameter of the hash function. Typically, a hash function generates always digest of the same size, up to now. And intuitively, a hash function should be one way, which means that if you get the output, it's hard to find the corresponding input. That's more a high level requirements. And it has a lot of applications in cryptography. So like in signatures, you don't sign the message, but you typically first compress the message to a digest, and then you sign the digest. On key derivation, you derive session keys from a master key. For instance, this is used in SSL and DRS. You have in protocols bit commitments, predictions. You can use hash function to compute a MAC, and you can of course also scramble passwords with it. So if you take a look at the mainstream hash functions, the hash functions that are in use today, there's very few attempts at direct design of a hash function. What they typically do, they design something that takes a fixed input length, an input of a fixed length, and then iterates it in some way so that it can treat a lot of data. So this is what you see in the most popular hash functions. And by the popular hash functions, I mean, in fact, those are the MD5 family. So MD5 dates back to 1992. It's in fact the successor of MD4. It was designed by André Best. It gives you a digest of 128 bits, 16 bytes. Still used nowadays, I think, but it shouldn't because it's very badly broken. Then NIST came up with a new design, but very much inspired by MD5. In '93, they called it SHA, which stands for Secure Hash Algorithm. And they found some weakness in it themselves, and they called the successor SHA-1. So SHA-1 is in fact a tweaked SHA that they in fact renamed to SHA-0 afterwards. And it became the standard in '95. And SHA-1 is still now the most used hash function for instance, in certificates on the internet. And then later they came up with SHA-2, kind of successor to SHA-1, which, yes, I forgot to mention, SHA-1 supports an output length of 160 bits, so that's 20 bytes. SHA-2 had longer output length, so there are 4 versions, SHA-224, 256, 384, and 512, and these numbers, they specify the output length. So you can generate longer hashes with the SHA-2 family. So what do they look like at the inside? It's in fact based on a very elegant construction, the so-called Merkle-Damgard chaining mode. And what you do is basically you take your input string, you cut it into a sequence of blocks of a particular block length, and then you apply this iteratively to a compression function f. So this compression function f, it takes the chaining value, that's the arrow at the bottom, and it takes an input block and generates a new chain. And in this way, in fact, these chaining values are hashed in, these input blocks are hashed into the chaining value, and the final value at the end, that's the digest, or sometimes we also do a kind of truncation or so, but in these MD5 and SHA functions, they just take the digest. And the initial value, so the initial value for the chaining value is a constant, that's the ID block there at the left. So this has the property that if your function f, your compression f, is collision resistant, which means that it is hard to generate 2 inputs that lead to the same output, then this big scheme is also collision resistant. So they can prove that. Well, they can prove that not really for this figure, they can prove that for this figure, where they, in fact, at the end of the message, there's the thing in yellow, they code the length of the message. So they input a coding of the input of the length of the message to the input. So this is called Merkle-Damgard string. And for this construction, so you can prove that if your function f is collision resistant, then your whole construction is collision resistant. So this is very nice, because then you have reduced our problem of having to design a variable input length function that is collision resistant to a fixed input length function that is collision resistant. But this has some properties that are not ideal. And this property is called length extension. But I will now not explain what this means because it will take me too far. But basically, it's when you want to use this function in the context of a Mac, then you have certain problems. And so people came up with a fix. And basically, it comes down to doing something special at the end. And that's this yellow block. So you apply one more. You do one more call to f, where in fact the chaining value, you don't input it in the bottom part but in the top part, and you apply a new value. And then you have fixed this problem. And this is called enveloped Merkle-Damgard. Now, in many applications, this fixed output length is not really what you want. So, for instance, in full domain hashing, so in these PKCS1 standard padding schemes, you need more than the output length of the hash function, and so you need a kind of way to extend the output of the hash function. And there's a simple construction defined for that. It's called the mask generating function. And what you do is basically you do multiple applications of the hash function to the input string where you just concatenate a count. So that's the 0, 1, 2 in the yellow block. Now this looks like very heavy, but in fact all these computations of the first, here in this case, the first 3 calls to f, they are in common. So you don't have to do all this. You can just share that computation. So in this way you can generate an output which is called the mask of any length. Well, of any length. Depends of course how many counter values you can support, but you can have really very long outputs. Now, we spoke about the compression function. So what we want to design now is a compression function that is collision resistant, that has the good properties. But there's not much known about how to do that. What we do know from experience is how to do a block cipher. how to design a block cipher. So what we're just going to do, we're going to put, and that's also what they did in MD5 and SHA-1 and SHA-2, we're just going to put inside this block, we're going to put a block cipher where in fact we encrypt the chaining value with the message block as key. That's basically what we do. And the cryptogram is the new chaining value. So, of course, if it's an existing block cipher, then you can say that, but in SHA-1, these are in fact dedicated block ciphers, and they call the message, they call the key schedule, they call that message expansion, and it is not never really explicitly defined as a block cipher, but it has the same structure as a block. Now, a block cipher has a very interesting property. Basically, you can encrypt a block under a key, but you can also decrypt a block under a key. Which means that if you take the output CV and you take a key, you can go back to the input CV. Which means that if you have a given, for any given output, you can generate as many inputs as you like, so you can easily generate collisions. And you just fix the output, you take the key, and you compute the corresponding input. So this means you can easily generate collisions. But then if you have a proof that says if this function is collision resistant, then your hash function is collision resistant, that proof is worthless if you can easily generate collisions. So this can be fixed by adding a feed forward. So that's what they do. This is what you see inside MD5 and SHA-1 and SHA-2. So the whole scheme of a hash function now becomes like this. So where we started initially with our very elegant word-of-boundary construction, there's not much left of this elegance. So you get a really very complex scheme, and you use a block cipher, and the block cipher is not designed. It's not good for it. So that's also what our construction is an answer. So, in fact, hashing, you can, with modern hash functions, with hash functions in use now today, you can see there's modes of use of block cipher. And you can do a lot of other stuff with block ciphers. You can encrypt, with block encryption, ECB mode, CBC mode. You can do stream encryption, counter mode, ORB mode. You can do self-synchronizing stream encryption, CRB mode. You can do MAC computation, CBC MAC, CMAC, and so on. You can even do authenticated encryption. These modes, OCB, GCM, CCM. So basically, you can do a lot of things with block ciphers, and this would be more correct to say it's not the hash functions that are the Swiss Army knives of crypto, it's the block ciphers that are the Swiss Army knives of crypto. And the hash functions are just a mode of use of block ciphers, as it is today. Okay, back to hashing. If you look at these hash functions, MD5 and so on, you see that they make use of a particular set of operations at their basis. And these operations are addition modulo 2 to the power of n, where n is 32 or 64, so that's 32-bit additions, so it's very software friendly, I could say. Bitwise addition, so XOR, between 32-bit words or 64-bit words, and shift operations and cycling shifts. So shifting the bits in a word, and where in many cases you take the bits that shift outside the word at one end and feed them back in the other. And the security is based on the incompatibility, algebraically speaking, between these operations. So that means that if you do A XOR B plus C, it's not equal to A XOR B plus C. So that kind of inequality. So the idea is that this is very elegant, but in fact it assumes a certain integer coding. It assumes that your integers are coded in a particular way, and it assumes a certain architecture. That is often left implicit. It's also very efficient. Well, it is efficient if you run on a CPU where the word length matches this n. If you do it in hardware, that's something else. And it appears to be very solid, so very hard to attack. But it's also very hard to analyze. So it's very hard to evaluate whether it is secure. And if you look at these attacks on these schemes, they have only appeared after many years, after this SHA-1, it has taken, I think, 10 years or so before the first relevant attacks have appeared. So this is a long list of attacks on these functions, on the mainstream hash functions. So it already started in 91, and it has continued till this day. So this is just some highlights. You can fill 20 slides with all kinds of attacks. These black attacks, they are basically attacks that attack the ARX at the bottom, at the basis of the function. And these three blue lines, they are attacks that work at the scheme level. So they, in fact, are independent of what you do inside. These blue attacks I will come back later to them. Oh, so the sharp people. So in 2005, 2006, there was a bit of a crisis. There was a fear that the hash functions would not hold. There were attacks that were putting ARX into question. There were attacks that put Morgan-Damgard into question, mostly on MD5 and SHA-1. And in fact, SHA-2 was based on the same principles, as these other functions. So NIST was worrying, and they decided, okay, let's attack the situation. Let's go for a successor. And let's do it in the same way as we did for AES. So have a kind of contest where everybody can participate. So that was a very nice idea, of course. So the idea was NIST provided a forum, and the cryptographic community could contribute. So they were asked to send in designs. They were asked after the designs whether to attack the designs, to do evaluations, to look at implementations, to do comparisons, all kinds of stuff. Then NIST drew its conclusions and would decide and motivate their decision with their So the goal of the contest was, in fact, to find a replacement for the SHA-2 family. So that means for 4 output lengths, 224, 256, 384, and 512 bit. Other output lengths could be supported, but were not mandatory. There were a number of requirements. So security levels with respect to the traditional attacks, so I will detail that more in the following slides. And each submission should have reference code and motivation and unique, ambiguous specification and rationale and so on. So a big file. So this is about the time schedule. The initial call came in January 2007. I think there were rumors before that date already that this would take place. In October 2008, there was a deadline for submissions, so everybody should have sent in their submission to NIST. In February 2009 in Leuven, there was a first SHA-3 conference where there were 51 candidates that presented their proposal. And then already in July of that year, NIST reduced these 51 to 15 or 14 second round candidates. So there were already a big cut from 51 to 14. I think there was not really much valuable that was then eliminated. Then in August 2010 there was a second conference in Santa Barbara, the Gallup Crypto Conference in California, where there were new results announced, and there were hardware comparisons, software comparisons, even new applications. And then in December 2010, so 2 years ago, they announced the finalists, which were Date, Crystal, GH, Getjack, and Spain. And finally, March of this year, there was a final SHA-3 conference, so it was quite a long time that went over the period that there were 5 finals, so they was really thoroughly evaluated in Washington, and then October 2, in fact, exactly 12 years later than the AES announcements, they announced the winner, which is so let's have a look at hash function security requirements. So the traditional security requirements are pre-image resistance, second pre-image resistance, and collision resistance. So that's what you also see on each presentation on hash functions. So pre-image resistance basically says that if you know an output, try to find an input. And there exists generic attacks that where you just try inputs and you look at the output. So it's independent of what the function looks like. You can always do this attack even for the best function. And how many times do you have to try? Well, of course, you have to just, each time the probability of success is 1 over 2 to the power of n, and n is the number of bits in the output. So you would have to try 2 to the power of n times. And then the requirement is, well, there is no attack that will do it in less. Well, you can always be lucky, but on the average, there is no attack that does it in less than 2 to the power of n calls to this attack. Right? Second pre-image is something very similar, but there you know an input, you know the output, and you are requested to generate a second input which leads to the same output. Basically, the attack in the generic model is the same. Just try different inputs until you hit the correct output value. So it's again 2 to the power of n. And collision resistance is generating 2 inputs which leads to the same output. So there, it's not a particular output that you should hit. So if you compute, you can just take a pair of inputs and see if their outputs match. And you can do that again. That would give you also a complexity of 2 to the power of n. But in fact, if you generate 3 inputs, then A can match with B, B can match with C, but A can match with C. And if you get 4 inputs, then you get, in fact, 6 combinations. If you have 5 inputs, you get 10, and so on. So it's in fact combinatorial, it's quadratic. So the number of combinations 2 out of n, or 2 out of I, grows quadratic with the number of I. So that's what is called the birthday paradox. In fact, if you're in a room with 23 people, there will be typically 2 people with the same birthday. It's counterintuitive, but not really, because there are many in a room with 23 people. There are 300, I don't know how many exactly, combinations of 2 people out of 23. So basically, here, there should not be an attack that does that in faster than 2 to the power of n divided by 2. If your output length is n, then your security level with respect to collision resistance is 2 to the power of n divided by 2. Okay, so that are the 3 main requirements. But there are many other requirements. So, for instance, if you want to use the hash function as a MAC, we need a property called resistance against the length extension. So these functions, SHA-1 and so on, they don't have this property, but their list has defined a special MAC mode called HMAC that in fact repairs this problem. In many cases, you use hash functions to destroy algebraic structures. So if you work with RSA, if you just use RSA very simply as an exponentiation, it is not secure. You need to first destroy mathematical structure. For that, they use hash functions. So for encryption, for instance, they use a scheme called optimal asymmetric encryption scheme. It's defined in the RSA lab standard PKCS1. It makes use of a hash function. Actually, it makes use of a mask-generated function. So this is the big scheme. Similar for signature, they have a scheme called probabilistic signature scheme. Here. So the problem is you have other requirements than the basic ones. How can you know whether a hash function has been designed to meet these requirements? So this Mac is a good example. If you would just do a naive Mac implementation where you just append the key and the message and you give that, you present that with MD5, it's insecure. Because MD5 is not designed to do that. You can, of course, it would be nice to make a hash function that is probably secure, but that does not exist. So probably secure symmetric crypto components do not exist, except maybe the one-time pad, but there your key is as long as your message. So if you have to encrypt your hard disk, then you need a key that has the size of your hard disk. That's probably secure. So probably secure is not practical. Sometimes you can do some kind of reductions, but it stays a very heuristic argument. So what you can do is publish your stuff and rely on public scrutiny. Rely on people trying to attack it, but not being able to print it. That's how it works in crypto. But then, what does it mean for a scheme to be broken? Well, what you can have, you can make a kind of security claim that says, we consider this function to be broken if you can find an attack in this. So you can specify, for instance, this collision resistant. If someone finds a collision, finds an algorithm to generate collisions with complexity less than 2 to the power of n over 2, that function is considered to be broken. But that's easy for collision resistance, but there are many other properties. So an attack that invalidates a claim breaks the function. Often you see that claims are implicit, but nowadays more and more people are advocating having explicit claims. So we are now faced with the problem of defining a claim. So it's not about design, it's about when you have designed something, saying what it's supposed to do. So specifying what the cryptographic properties are supposed to be of this thing you design. You cannot prove that they have it, you can just, even making a statement, that's a problem by itself. So you can make a list. You can say, okay, for collision resistance, we want this to be the resistance. For second pre-image resistance, we want this to be security level, and so on. And you can make a list. And you see there things like chosen target force prefix pre-image resistance. That's not a term I made up by myself. That's really people publish that. So this, just to illustrate, you can invent terms and you can write whole books with only these terms. So this list of desired properties grows and grows and grows. So that's very inconvenient, because if you design a hash function and there are new concepts invented afterwards, then your hash function is not necessarily designed to meet these criteria. So you get a moving target. So this does not work, this list. What would work is, in fact, if you would have some kind of ideal model of saying this would be really, this is the ideal hash function. And the ideal hash function, in fact, is called a random oracle. So what is a random oracle? It was defined by Dellar and Rodway in 93. Well, at least we follow this definition of 93. It takes as input a message of variable length, so as an argument, and it generates as a response an infinite output stream. So you can send a query with a message and a request of length, and it will give you the first L bits of this output. So this response, these L bits, they are in fact uniformly distributed, and it's like someone has a coin, flips a coin L times, and those bits out. It's self-consistent, so if you send the same message twice, you get the same output. So basically, you can see it as some, we always have the ego model, so you have there's somewhere an Eskimo in an ego sitting there, and you send him a message. He looks at the message, he records it in his database. If he finds no match, he will generate L bits. He will give these bits to the outside world, and he will record this message in his database, and also these L bits. If he gets a new message, he will check if it's in the database. If it's already in the database, he will just take out these L bits and give them back in. That's how it works. That's the ideal hash function. So you can make a very compact security claim. You can say, my function behaves like a random function. And if you can find an attack that works on my function and does not work on a random oracle, or it works, has more success on my function on a random oracle, my function is true. That does not work, unfortunately, because of this. As I've shown you the Markov-Damgard iteration structure, you work on a finite state. So this chaining value, everything, all the message blocks that have been hashed up to a certain point, they have all been absorbed in one chaining value that has a small size. And the output is basically a function of this chaining value. And all hash functions that I know of that are practical work in this way. And what you can have, basically, is that two partial messages, so this, at the left top, this message M and then M star below, they may at a given moment lead to the same chaining value. So you get a kind of collision, not in the output, but in the internal chaining value. And if you have that, then this is not only the case for these two messages, M and M star, but for any message where M and M star, I put M apparently, M and M star where you put a string X, whatever the value of this string X is, because if the string X is the same, you can never split it. And this is a problem because I don't have that in random oracles. And in fact, if you look at the attacks that have been presented in the middle, let's say 6-7 years ago, they are all based on internal collisions. So in 2004, there was an attack showing multi-collisions. That's in fact where you have not two messages colliding to the same value, but 2,000 messages colliding to the same value. And they make use of these internal collisions. There were a number of attacks by Kushnaya and John Kelsey of NIST, John Kelsey and Kono, also making use of internal collisions. And the problem basically is that in Markov-Damgard, this size of the chaining value and the size of the output is the same. That's called narrow pi. So how can we deal with these internal collisions? Random oracle does not have internal collisions. Well, let's say you truncate a random oracle to n bits, then you can have collisions indeed, because you can just generate 2 to the power n divided by 2 messages. It will very likely be a collision. But it's not really an internal collision, because if you take two messages mx and m prime x, they will not collide. Well, they may collide, but it's very unlikely that they collide. But in usual iterated mode, they will collide. So it's certainty. So a random oracle, you can see it as working on a chaining value of infinite size. If you do something practical, you cannot deal with infinite size. So there are two solutions to deal with this. First, you can say, okay, we're not going to use this iterated construction. We're going to do something that comes closer to a random oracle. For instance, take a very large amount of memory, use 1 gigabyte of RAM or something. In fact, where the amount of RAM should grow when your message size grows. Or you can just model this. And that's the approach we do. And that's where we get this point. So we model this finite memory, and we are prepared to deal with internal collisions and incorporate that in our model. There's another use case where this random oracle model is really a problem. That's when you generate a hash function that generate a variable output length. So having, for instance, 4 different hash functions for 4 different output lengths, we think it's not a good idea. It would be nice if you can make one function that generates any output length. So you can vary the output length from 1 bit to an infinite number of bits. Because in many cases, that's how the hash function is used anyway, where the output length is extended by doing this mask generating function. And you can also use it then as a stream slider. The problem is if you generate 256 bits of output, then these requirements 2n, 2n, 2n divided by 2 make sense. What if you generate 1,000,000 bits of output? Does that still make sense? can you really get this kind of security? Obviously not. So you can get an infinite output length, you would be able to have infinite security. That does not. Okay. So how can we have a compact security claim? We would like to define something P that has the same interface as a random oracle. It behaves like a random oracle, except for internal collisions. So it may exhibit internal collisions, but outside of that, it should behave ideally. And we can have in P, and the random oracle, there is no parameter. A random oracle is a random oracle. It does not have a size or something. Well, it has an infinite size, yes. Here we can afford to have some size. And then a compact security claim would be, my function behaves as P with some given size. Okay? And the output length does not appear in the security claim. So here, this security claim is 2n. That's as a function of the output length. No, the output length no longer appears in the security claim. So what could P be? P is, of course, this one. So this is the sponge construction. That is the basis for our security claim, and later became also the basis for our design. So you see there a function f, that's basically a function, a permutation or a transformation operating on C plus R bits. So you see that at the left, you see that C and R, we often also call that B equals C plus R. That's the width of the permutation, the fixed width permutation or transformation. And these B bits are split in two parts. A top part, which we call the outer part, R bits, where R stands for the bit rate, okay. And the lower part, C bits, which stands for the capacity. So the processing goes as follows. You take a message, you pad it, so, until it is a whole number of blocks, of R-bit blocks. So then you apply the first R-bit block. So you first initialize the state to 0. So the R plus B bits of the state, R plus C bits are initialized to 0. Then you XOR the first block of the message into the outer part, so into the R bits. So this first block is R bits. Then you apply the function f to the state. You apply again by an XOR the second R bit block of the message to the outer part of the state, to the top part. So you continue like that until the whole message is absorbed into the state. So that's the absorbing part. Then you switch to the squeezing part, where you immediately give out the first R bits of the state. So the top R bits, the outer part. Then you apply the function again, and then you give out again an R bit. And you do that until you reached L, so if you've done enough iterations to give you back the requested number of output bits. Yeah. So you can see here that you have to do one call to F plus R bits. So if R is very small, it's not so efficient. If R is very large, it becomes efficient. But the security level basically depends on C. The amount of security you can reach depends on C. The bigger C, the better. So C stands for security, R stands for efficiency. So you have a trade-off between security and efficiency. You can put this limit anywhere. So in our security claim, we use so-called random sponges, where random means that f, this function f, is either chosen randomly from all possible transformations, or it's chosen randomly from all possible permutations. We call it the p-sponges that chosen from the transformation and p-sponges from the permutations. And these random sponges, they become our reference p. So basically, the size parameter R and the size parameter C. And it turns out we can easily prove, so it's a very simple proof, or I think only 10 lines, that this behaves like a random oracle below 2 to the power C over 2 calls to F. So for an attacker that can only do 2 to the power C divided by 2 calls to this inner function F, this behaves like a random oracle. And basically it is what we set out to do. In the beginning, we wanted to have a kind of a thing that is as close as possible to a random oracle, but exhibits internal collisions, and that's exactly it. Okay, so there are still two parameters, R and C, but you can easily see, well, if you look at the formulas, this is really C that is important in the security file, in the security properties. And there we came up with a flat sponge claim. So that is then the replacement of this long list of security requirements. You just replace it by a single claim with this. And there's one parameter called the capacity. And what the claim says is that for a function h, for which we make the claim, the success probability of an attack, so this PR success h, is not above the success probability of the attack applied to a random oracle, plus a term that is in fact n squared divided by 2 to the power c plus 1. This n is in fact the attack workload expressed in terms of number of calls to n, to the inner function. And it's related to the input length and output length that you require. So what this says is basically if this term at the right is very small, then our function behaves as a random oracle. If this term is large, then our function has this limited. So it's to say the function is as good as a random oracle, except for this term. And this term represents inner collisions. Okay, so I have, after the break, we will continue. So, yeah, so maybe we break now.
Yeah, break now for 15 minutes.
So for those 10 more minutes, I'll see you back in front. So if you get, so I explained about this flat sponge claim, so on the previous slide. So let's now see what this looks like. So let's say we make a hash function, we say, okay, we claim it to have a security of corresponding to a flat sponge claim with a capacity value of 256 bits. Then, if the capacity value is 256 bits, then this term there, this n squared divided by 2 to the power c plus 1, it becomes big when n is about 2 to the power 128. So for collision resistance, what does that mean? So we have a function with variable output. So let's say we truncate its output to 128 bits. So if we truncate this output to 128 bits, then there is, in for a random oracle, the security strength is 2 to the power 64. So we need 2 to the power 64 effort to get a collision. And for this value, for this n to the power 64, this value is negligible. So when does this value become large? Well, it's in fact when n equals 2 to the power 128. So what this says is we can build from this function, which is a variable output length function, by just truncating to n bits. You can truncate up to n bits, and it will behave as a random oracle up to 256 bits of output. So that means if we go beyond 256 bits, and if we would say, okay, we generate 512 bits, we will only get 256 bits of security. Below 256, we get only 2 to the power 128 security, and below we get the security of the output. So if we truncate to n below, then it is as n below 256, you get the security of a random oracle. Beyond that, it's this fixed ceiling. For clearance resistance, you can do the same exercise. There it turns out that if you go beyond output length 128, you hit the ceiling. So here, what you see is C acts as a kind of ceiling to the security. And this ceiling is the same for collision resistance and second clearance resistance. So we get a function that achieves the same security level for collision resistance as for second clearance resistance, which makes more sense than having different security levels for different properties. So if you look at the NIST Chapter 8 security requirements for the 4 different output lengths, and let's concentrate on 256, that okay, this instance of the function that you will propose, it should have a collision resistance 2 to the power 128. And it should have a pre-image resistance of 2 to the power of 256. So why would you need a better pre-image resistance than collision resistance? Why would you need a difference of a factor 2 to the power 128 for one particular attack, a difference of a factor 2 to the power 128 between collision resistance and pre-image resistance? Why would you need that? What is that for a kind of requirement? Huh? Why not say, wouldn't it be more logical to say, this function should offer you 2 to the power 128 against all attacks? Wouldn't that be more logical? That's what the flat sponge plane is about. For second pre-image resistance, they even put in there a factor L, where they divide in factor security level by L, because basically what these attacks here are, these numbers are there, these are not requirements from what you would like to have. These are requirements coming from what up to that moment was could be realized. What people thought would be possible. These are not requirements that say, this is what we like to have. This is a requirement that say, this is what up to now we could do. Right? These are requirements that say, narrow pipe, Merkle down. Oh, so this sponge construction, we did a lot of effort to define that thing, just to be able to define security requirements for the function we were at that time constructing called radio. But then we made the switch. We said maybe we can use the sponge construction to make a real construction and not just as a theoretical model. And that's what we call the hermetic sponge structure. So what we do is just we use this construction and we build a function f that should behave like a random permutation. Now, if you have a concrete function f, it can never behave like a random permutation because it's specified and it's fixed. A random permutation is not a theoretical concept where you pick a transformation or a permutation from the set of all possible permutations. And as soon as you initialize, as soon as you instantiate it, it's no longer random, obviously. So, but the goal is that f should have no exploitable properties. So it's a bit of a vague term, but it's also, well, it's just a design strategy. It's not something that you can prove. It's the intention that counts. And the concrete function that we used, that we defined based on this sponge reference sketch. So just to say that Keccak did not fall out of the sky like that, so it goes back a long time. There are ideas in Keccak that go back to Subterranean, a design I did in '91, so that's 21 years ago. Even before that, there was Sumhash, which was even a year earlier. It had already this variable length input and output, so you could use it as a hash function and use it as a stream cipher. And basically, it has a structure very similar to this, except the function f is a very simple function, while in Keccak we have a function f that should by itself have a lot of cryptographic properties. We call that a streaming mode function. The problem of Subterranean was that it was hardware oriented, so it's really, you could very efficiently implement it in hardware, and that's also what we did. We made an ASIC at the time. In software, it's very slow because it manipulates individual bits. So then, a few years later, I thought of, well, how can I build something that is more software-oriented? And I came up with StepRightUp, which was later published under the name Panama and tweaked a bit, but it's basically more or less the same. And I teamed up with a software expert, Craig Clapp, that did some very efficient implementations of Panama. It was really a powerful function. Very powerful, but also very weak, so it was broken by Vincent Reijnen and some colleagues, so the guy who did AES together with me. And after his attack, Jill and I took a look at it, and it turned out that we could attack it faster than the function itself computes. So generating the collision faster than it was really very bad. But it has very interestingly, so it has a hash component and it has a stream cipher component. And the stream cipher component is as fast as the hash component, and it has not been broken up to this day. So there's no attack. While the hash function is clearly very weak, the stream cipher apparently still holds against the hash. So then we formed a team, after we found this attack, we formed a team to fix Panama and to have a new function that would be inspired by Panama but not have the weakness. And at that time, that was the first effort of what we now call the catch-up team, so Guido, Michael, Jill, and I. And the result was radio cartoon. So it was not really a big success, so we published it, but it was just like a research site to see what kind of ideas we could explore. And we were doing experiments, and it did not look very well. So it looked like it was much weaker even than what we thought, even though we thought we had fixed the problems in Panama. And the NIST Chat3 deadline was approaching, and we had nothing. We had this proposal that we were not comfortable with. And we took a U-turn, and we decided to use this sponge construction that we had in fact defined to define the security properties of radio cartoon. We decided to use it really as a design, for design. And that was Ketchup. So it's 2008. So in Ketchup, this function f, that is in this sponge construction that you see figured in the sponge construction, we call that Ketchup f, not very inspired maybe. And this function should be, in fact, hard to distinguish from a random permutation. So it should not have properties that a random permutation would not have. And then you come back to the list of all criteria that have in symmetric cryptography, and there we have again a list, and we cannot avoid having a list, unfortunately. The typical linear cryptanalysis, differential cryptanalysis arguments, differential propagation properties, correlation properties. People with some background in cryptography, they will recognize all this. Immunity to all kinds of attacks, like algebraic attacks, integral cryptanalysis, symmetric properties, and so on and so on. So that's the usual cryptographic problem. So we have to design a permutation. So the first thing to decide is the permutation bit. So how many bits are treated in this permutation? So looking at the NIST requirements, well, we looked at the NIST requirements and we looked at what we thought would be interesting requirements. So we did not really completely follow the philosophy of NIST. We followed our own idea of what security should be because we thought we knew it better than NIST. And in the long term, security strength up to 256 bits was needed. So if you want security strength of 2 to the 56 bits, that's 2 to the power of 256, you want the capacity that is the double. So we needed a capacity of 512 bits, which means the rate is in fact the width of the permutation minus this 512 bits. So that's the efficiency. If you take, for instance, a width of a permutation of 600 bits, you only have 88 bits of rate. So you can only process 88 bits per round. So that's a really strict minimum. The higher the better, because then the rate part becomes a larger proportion of the state. And so if you get a too big state, that's not good because it's software on low-end platforms or on hardware that takes a lot of resources. So we had something in the range 600 to 2,400, that was our target. Then designing this thing, well, how you design such a thing, it's in fact easy. It's like a block cipher. And what do you do in a block cipher? You do a simple round, you do it many times. So like in AES, we have a simple round of 4 steps. It has some nonlinearity, it has some diffusion, and you do it a number of times, and that makes it strong. But it's not like a block cipher, because a block cipher has a key, and a block cipher has a key schedule. It's no key schedule. Also not a message expansion, what is called a message expansion, no, because it is a permutation. There are no round keys, but we have round constants to get rid of the symmetry properties. And there's also another very interesting property. In a block cipher, you need to do decryption also. So that means that the round of a block cipher should be efficient, but the inverse of the round should also be efficient. Here we don't need this inverse permutation. We don't need this inverse round. So the inverse round does not need to be efficient. So we have more degrees of freedom. So what's in fact the design of a permutation is easier than that of a block cipher because you don't need a key schedule and we don't have certain requirements. Okay, so Ketchak, as said, is the sponge function and uses the permutation Ketchak F. In fact, there are 7 different permutations of width 25, 50, 100, 200, and so on, up to 1600. And the 1600 version is the one we proposed for the SHA-3 standard. All the other ones are, well, 25 and 50, that's toy version. It's just to do experiments on. From 100 to 100, 400, you can use these, for instance, in lightweight crypto. Nowadays, there's a lot of hype about lightweight crypto, Internet of Things, and RFID security, and so on, where you need to implement it on a platform with very little resources. So if you have a small permutation, then you can implement it in a small circuit. And that's where these values 200 and 400 come in. So within a given permutation, you can vary the rate and the capacity to have a good security speed trade-off. So you see that this trade-off becomes more interesting as the permutation grows. And because then for the same level of security, your rate is much bigger. But of course, it takes also more resources. So as an example here, for SHA-3, what we proposed was a rate of 1024, giving a capacity of 576, which gives you a security level 2 to the power 288. A claimed security level. Of course, the security levels are always claimed. And it's not, we don't say it is, as we say, try to break it with a complexity below this. That's what we say. In lightweight, you can use, for instance, CatcherGraph 200. You can have a rate of 40, a capacity of 160. That gives you 2 to the power 80 security. So that's as much security as it gives you, for instance, SHA-1 against collision. Now, SHA-1 does no longer give you any more, a lot of security against collision, but the claimed security level 2 to the power 80 is still alive. So breaking 2 to the power 80, you need a lot of resources for that. So that's still a reasonable value, and you only need to implement CatcherGraph 200 for it. Okay, so now the intervals. So basically, all operations in CatcherGraph, they operate on a state that is a three-dimensional array. So you get, in fact, a 5 by 5 slices. So you get these squares of 5 by 5 bits that are called slices. Orthogonal to the slices, we call these things lanes. So a sequence of bits from the same position in each slide is called a lane. The length of the lane depends on the permutation width, so it can be 1, 2, 3, it's always a power. So for the CatcherGraph version for the SHA-3 standard is 64 bits. So you can easily map these lanes to computer work, to CPU work. So within the slides we have rows, 5-bit rows, 5-bit columns. Okay, so the mapping to the round function of CatcherGraph, so you repeat a simple round function many times, this consists of a number of steps. And the first step is in fact here, it's a nonlinear mapping. And the nonlinear mapping operates on all rows independently. So here you have this state, and you have 5 rows per slice, and you have 2 to the power L slices, so in general you have many rows. For instance, in the CatcherGraph 1600 version of SHA-3, you have 320 rows. You can also see that as 320 S boxes. So what do? Basically, you take, for each bit, you flip it if its neighbors exhibit a pattern equal to 0, 1. So if its first neighbor at the right is 0 and the neighbor after that is 1, then you flip it. That's as simple as it is. That's the nonlinear mapping in Catcher. That's the only nonlinearity in all of Catcher. This simple function has an algebraic degree 2, so you can easily investigate the properties with a lot of mathematical tools. But that's as opposed to ERX, which is very hard to analyze. Then the other very important mapping is the mixing layer. It's called theta. Well, in fact, initially in the design phase, we started with this, which we afterwards called theta prime to distinguish it from the final theta. So what we do is, in fact, we take the state and we compute the parity of each column. So remember that these columns are the 5-bit entities within each size. So with each column corresponds one parity bit. And parity bit, you know what the parity bit is, probably it is 1 if the number of 1 bits in this column is odd, and is 0 if the number of 1 bits in the column is 0. So this reduces the size of the state to that of a parity, 1/5 of the state. Yeah? Then we combine these parities. In fact, they're above. If you look at the expression, we compute in fact Cx minus 1z plus Cx plus z. So basically, we just take a shift of this column parity and add it to itself. Then we expand it again to the size of the full state. And that's what we call the theta effect. Yeah? So we take the parity, we combine, we expand it again, and we add it to the original state. Okay. So it's maybe not so transparent what this does. It's something that looks heavy, but it's in fact very cheap in number of operations. It costs basically 1 XOR, 2 XORs per bit. So if you implement it as computer words, it says 2 XORs per computer word in total. So if you have in total 25 computer words, that's 50 XORs. If you do it in hardware, it's only 2 XOR gates per bit. So what's the diffusion of this? Diffusion is the term used to say the spreading, to express the spreading of information. If you flip a single bit in the input, so if you have an input and then you flip 1 bit, that will flip 11 bits at the output of data. And these 11 bits will be in this H pattern. So each of these 11 bits depends on this bit. But that's not so bad. So you get a diffusion factor of 11. Well, you could think it's not so bad, but it's not so good either, because if you flip 2 bits in the same column, then the parity is not changed, and the data becomes the identity. Right? But we can compensate for that. If you look at the inverse, if you look at Deb inverse and it's invertible, you flip a bit at the output, that flips 11 bits at the input. It's also a kind of an H shape or a Canadian flag shape. But they're not in the same position, but quantitatively it's the same. It's 11 bits. And there you get also, of course, this kernel effect where you have, if you flip 2 bits in the same column, okay. Just to give you some intuition. So up to now, we did heap which operates on individual rows, and we did data which operates within the slice. So there's no interaction between the slices. So there we have roles for having this interaction between the slices. And in fact, each of the 25 rows, we cyclically shift them. So it's like a cyclic word shift in the CPU. So that's what the figure is supposed to express. So if you have we used a particular expression for computing the shift offsets, and in fact you can show that they cycle through all values below 2 to the power L. So any value of L. So 2 to the power L, remember that's the length of the days, and it ranges from 1 to 64 depending on the size of the computation. So then there's a lot of symmetry. So basically we do everything in the state works in the same way. So which means that if we would take an all 0 state, it would map to the all 0 state. All 3 mappings would map them to the all 0 state. Same for the all 1 state. And there are many symmetries. So for that reason, they put constants. We add some constants. So we flip some bits here and there, and this constant changes from round to round. So without these constants, it would be a very weak function. But with the constants, there's apparently this has been compensated. So we can have a first attempt at the round function of Ketchak F. We compute the round function as doing the key, the nonlinear step, followed by theta, the mixing layer, followed by rho, the shifting of the lanes, followed by adding a constant. Now the problem is, if we flip 2 bits, and we go through rho, and then in fact, if they are the same column, rho is just the identity, and then we go through, we go then to rho, then for certain positions, it turns out that these bits are still in the same slice. So the problem is that in the next round, they will again be in the same slice, and you will get some propagation structure that is a very high probability and does not, can lead to a weakness. So you can say, okay, then you just have to design a hole in a better way. But there is something in this structure. Basically, if you look at a version, let's say, the version with the 4-bit words and with the 8-bit words, then a propagation structure that is valid for the 4-bit words, it's also valid for the 8-bit words if you double it. That's because of the symmetry. So that's a wanted effect. That's what we on purpose did to be able to reuse analysis done for the smaller versions to extrapolate them to the larger versions. That's what we call the Matryoshka problem. Yeah? You know the Russian dolls. So each smaller version, each bigger version is in fact a kind of extrapolation of the smaller version. So because of this, we will always have this problem with Bo, and we will always have these weak structures. So we need to do something else. We need to, in fact, this horizontal, this vertical alignment, we need to destroy it. And then we put another mapping called P, which in fact moves the positions of the lanes. And it's expressed with a simple algebraic expression in the coordinates of the lanes. And you see the effect in the six squares there. So you can see where the dot is, that's where the lane is before applying P, and in the gray square is where the lane is after applying P. So you will notice that in the middle there is the origin that always stays at its place. That's because of the consequence of applying a linear mapping. And all the others, you can cycle through them, and you will notice that they will follow a cycle of 24. So they follow the largest cycle possible. Okay, then the second attempt. If we apply additionally at P, you can see that P there, he moves the two positions to different positions, to different columns, and the problem is fixed. Okay, so then we had the last, then when we did experiments, we noticed that it was not as good as we thought, and we decided to tweak theta. So when we got the final theta, where basically instead of having this H, we have one of the legs of the H goes one slice backwards. Now this is quantitatively, it has the same diffusion as theta itself, because it just goes from 1 bit to 11 bits. But the interesting thing occurs when you look at the inverse. The inverse of theta looks like this. If you flip a bit at the output of theta, then if you apply theta minus 1, about half of the bits of the input flip. So if you look at, for instance, Ketchaker 1600, then about 800 bits will flip. So that gives you a multiplication factor of 800 for a single bit flip. Of course, if you flip 2 bits, then it stays, that's the kernel. But this makes attacks much harder, because this means that you have to really put your bits right. This puts a lot of restrictions on attacks, and many people that, many, at least 4 or 5 people that have tried to attack Ketchaker, they have found that this, there are not so many people who have analysis. No, 4 or 5 teams, I should say, because there's always 3 or 4 people, so yeah. More than 10 people have said that this is really something that makes cryptanalysis difficult. And this, yes, so this increases the resistance against the classical attacks, linear and differential cryptanalysis, but also algebraic attacks, because it gives you much more dependencies. So, Ketchaker summary, we got a round function consisting of 5 steps. So it's, in fact, they're scheduled as such in the final version. First, the mixing layer, then the 2 bit permutation layers where we apply rho and then P, and then the nonlinear layer C, and then a round constants. So the number of rounds is 12 plus 2L, which means that Ketchaker 25 has 12 rounds, Ketchaker 1600 has 24 rounds. There's a high level of parallelism, which is very interesting in dedicated hardware. If you look at the Chatry competition in hardware, Ketchaker was really very good. You have some flexibility, so we can make use of the symmetry properties to implement the 64-bit version, so Ketchaker 1600 and 32-bit architecture by, in fact, storing the even number of bits and the odd number of bits in separate rows, so bit interleaving. So it turned out to be not the fastest. So the ARX proposals in the SHA-3 competition were the fastest, but it was quite competitive on a wide range of CPU. Dedicated are very fast, and also suited for protection against side channel attacks. So if you want to implement this in a keyed mode, to do, for instance, mark computation or encryption, stream cipher encryption, then you can easily build in protection against side channel attacks. Where for ARX, for instance, this is quasi impossible to do it in an efficient way. Okay, so that was SketchUp. Now the applications. So what can you do with this function? So SketchUp is a hash function. SHA-3 is a hash function, but SketchUp is more than a hash function. So for just hashing, what you do is you just truncate the output where you want to have it. So if you want to generate an output of 256 bits, yeah, then just ask for 256 bits. So that's very simple. There's been some discussion about adding salts to hashing. I think it's also used a lot in password scrambling. Well, you just append that salt to the message. Simple as that. If you want to have a function that is very slow, then you append to the message a lot of zeros, and you can make it as slow as you like. If you want to use it as a map, just prepend the key to the message. So in HMAC, there's a lot of HMAC is a construction that also computes a map. And it's quite complex, but it's complex to compensate for weaknesses that are present in SHA-1 and MD5, and later also in SHA-2. Here, this weakness is no longer present. I must say, it's also true for all the other finalists in the SHA-3 competition. For all other finalists in the SHA-3 competition, you can compute a map by just prepending the key to the message. It's a very simple way to compute a map. If you want to generate a key stream, well, then you just feed the key and the initial value, and you ask many bits. You get a short input or not. That's the stream structure. If you want the mask generating function, well, that's just a natural application of a sponge function. Basically, a sponge function is a mask generating function. So you don't need this stuff with the counter that you add. Okay. So you generate a map like this, as I explained. You load the key, you load message blocks, and then finally you squeeze out the tag. If you want to do encryption, you load the key, you load the nonce. And then immediately you start squeezing. You take your output blocks Z0, Z1, Z2, you add them to the message blocks M0, M1, M2, and that gives you the cipher, the cryptogram or the ciphertext stream C0, C1, C2, and you can go on as long as you want. So you get this, you get this. So it would be nice to do this. Huh? You do both, because that's the nowadays the big hype is authenticated encryption. Because in many cases you don't want just encrypt, you don't just want a map, you just want both. That's like what you have in TLS or SSL. You get authenticated encryption on both services. So if you do typically both, it costs the double of doing just encryption or the double of just map. In this case, if you would be able to do this, it does not cost you double, because you only have to apply one function f per block of message. As you see. So it's in fact, it costs the same as just encryption, the same as just mapping, and you get both. Now there is a problem, because this is no longer a sponge function. You do absorbing and squeezing at the same time. So you're squeezing these blocks Z0, Z1, Z2, but you're also absorbing the blocks M0, M1, M2. So that's not allowed in sponge construction. And so it's not necessarily secure. But we defined a sister construction called the defects that you can easily prove. You can show it with a simple figure, and I forgot to include a figure in the presentation, that is equivalent to the sponge. So basically you can have a reduction of this to the sponge. So if sponge construction is secure, this is secure. Now what does this do? Well, it's in fact kind of an object-oriented definition. You have an object that you first initialize, which simply consists of setting the state to 0, and then you can make duplexing calls. And in the duplexing call, you give input a string sigma that is then padded, with the sponge padding basically. You XOR it into the first R bits, and you can request any output up to R bits, and that's Z. So And you can repeat these calls, and in between calls, the function remembers its state. So it's a kind of object. And with this, you can apply this to just do authenticated encryption, because you, in fact, are inputting data and outputting data, or absorbing data and squeezing data at the same time. So what you have here are a number of limitations. So this sigma is at most R, or depending on the padding, in fact, it's typically less than R. So the padding we propose is R minus 2. Well, Z is equal to R, the maximum length. And what you see here is that each block Z depends on all previous inputs sigma. Right? Because all these previous inputs sigma, they have been absorbed and they are incorporated in the state. So authenticated encryption, a short note on what it's supposed to do. Typically in authenticated encryption, you have a data header and a data body. You want to encrypt the body, and you want to compute a map over the data header and the data body. So the data header is typically like if you have an IP package, it would be information like this sequence number. I don't know anything about IP, but it would be information that's not critical but important for the protocol that it is in the clear. So wrapping, you get as input a key, data header and body, and out comes a tag and a cryptogram. Unwrapping, you get also a key, you get data header and a cryptogram, and a tag, and the output is in fact either the plain text, there's an error on the slide, either the plain text, so the decrypted cryptogram, or an error message if the tag is invalid. So the two main security requirements are tag forgery and feasibility, so you should not be able to generate a message with a valid tag if you don't have the key. And also, you should not be able to recover the plain text if you don't have the key. So that's the confidentiality requirement. How can you do that with the duplex mode? With the duplex construction, this is an attempt to show that graphically. So this line there with the D blocks, that's in fact a duplex object. And each time you do a call to the duplex object, there is this D. So it's assumed to be initialized at the left. So first you absorb the key. Then you absorb your message header. And your message header can be multiple blocks. That's A0, E1. Then you absorb your data body, message header, message body, B0, B1, B2, and so on. You encipher your message body by XORing in the output of a duplex object, by XORing it blockwise to the data body blocks. And after you have input the last data body block, you give out the tag. So these colors, you see that it's slightly yellow, then blue, then yellow. That has to do with domain separation. Each call to the duplex object where you generate a cryptogram block, it's in blue. Each call to the, if it's yellow, then it either produces nothing or it produces a tag. So we need to have domain separation. We need to distinguish between the different blocks. So yellow blocks, they have one at the end, and they have a zero. So we have to, for the security, you need to distinguish between these two. So that's more or less how it works. So now the advantage of this is that it doesn't have to stop there. So if you have a communication with someone and you send multiple messages, can be you send one message, then another one, you can just continue working with the same duplex object and just insert a second message and so on. So that the following message also depends on your previous message. If you want the messages to arrive in the order that they were sent. So it depends on your protocol. Otherwise, you have to reinitialize your message and load the key. You can also have a pseudo-random bit generator that is reseedable. So it's something that is, for instance, standard. In this special documents, these things are specified. Basically, when you need outputs, that's this Z at the bottom, you do a duplex call. If you have new seed available, it can be that if your system is running, you get some new randomness in, you can just inject it whenever you like in the duplex object. So whenever you add seed, the state, afterwards the output, after adding this seed will depend on that seed, not before. Yeah, this issue of forward secrecy, so that's discussed a lot. So if you have, if someone would break this thing and get the complete internal state, then he would be able to predict the output as long as there's no new unknown seed injected. So that's called forward secrecy. That's in fact a violation of forward secrecy. And then we have a dedicated function, a dedicated call to the duplex object that forgets part of its state so that it is hard to complete that. Okay, so I think, yeah, I'm in time. So, I showed you as the first slide what typically the introductions say nowadays. So I think it would be nice if they now would start including permutations in these primitives, because basically these hash functions that were always called the Swiss Army knife of cryptography, they turned out to be just modes or block ciphers. And block ciphers are in fact the Swiss Army knife of cryptography. It would be nice if now permutations would be called the Swiss Army. Okay, that's it.
Okay, so, questions?
Yes, I'm Steve Nielsen from FNU. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you for the success of the SHA-3 competition. So I was thinking that you won the previous symmetric block cipher competition, then certainly it will be an American success this one, but it wasn't. Anyway, my question was about efficiency. And you forgot to mention that in one of the first slides.
Yeah.
You mentioned it fairly in some of the last slides. And that was also an important criteria at first, but then it was modified.
That's right.
During the competition.
Yes.
Now for the efficiency of hash functions related to this conference, it's quite the opposite, I learned recently. Because you want to, you certainly want to hash the password with some salt, but you want not to be too efficient, because then you have the possibility of a search, and I guess very many people here do this password search. They have to compute the hash function efficiently, and I did that myself with the OpenTTP recently, actually attack, where the number of iterations are, say, 60,000 or even billions of iterations. Now you indicated how you can do that for catch-up, but could you elaborate on that? How, would you claim that this adding the with the zero is secure?
Oh yes. Yes. So that was slide this one. Well, it's secure, yeah. So there's something interesting. So if you look at after the message has been hashed, oh yeah,
Another motivational device.
yeah. So here, in fact, what you do then, you just apply a permutation, and there's no entropy loss. See, because it's a permutation. F is a permutation, so you just apply a permutation iteratively to this state, and there's no information loss. While in a typical hash function, you get there. It's not a permutation because it's supposed to be Bayesian distance. The permutation is Bayesian distance is hard. So that worry is already not there. But of course, the problem is that for catch-up, it's much more efficient in hardware than in software. So because it's you see all these operations are very hardware oriented, and that's I guess, a disadvantage because someone who wants to crack passwords with a lot of resources, he can build dedicated hardware chips and he can use it to its advantage, while someone doing that on a PC just as a normal use would make use of the CPU. So there the hardware has an advantage over the CPU, which is a bad thing. But I think it would be possible to define some kind of mode that would be hard to do in hardware, taking a lot of memory or something like that. I don't know. But that's why I'm interested to see the talk tomorrow on that subject.
There will be a few comments. First of all, I remember from last year when I heard you talking about this as well.
Yeah.
One of the questions you actually got is why the length for the algorithm? Could you, maybe you would like to explain that one again.
Yeah.
Why the name?
Well, so we were in Luxembourg at some workshop, and we were in the crisis of radio Gathering that was not doing very well, and we had to find another one, and then we made the click. We said, we're going to do it this way. And I had on my PC, I still have it, maybe, I don't know, it's a kind of MP3 of ketchup dance. So it's a ritual in Bali. I don't know if people know it. So where they just fight and dance with a lot of shouting. And in fact, it's ketchup stands for sound. So and they said, let's going to take a steak and turn it around and we had it on the radio, and that was the idea. And then that was just a joke, and then we did not find a better name. But it's often like that.
I would also like to tell you that on October 2nd, I was sitting at home and I was watching my Twitter feed when I suddenly saw that the NIST had made its final decision and that Kachak was the winner of the NIST SHA-3 competition. And you know, in just a couple of minutes after that announcement, the joke started appearing that the next NIST competition will actually be held at Johan Dahlman's office, just to make it easier for everyone. I thought that was actually pretty funny.
Yeah, it was funny.
I don't know how big of an office you have, but
no, I don't have an office.
but one of the things that I actually did is I also put out in my tweet asking solo design of who is in Oslo with us, John Rickard, and some of those guys are also in here in the audience. I asked him, I asked Dickweasel, who's in the fourth row here. I also asked Aidan, who is a little bit higher up. Raise up your hand, Aidan. I asked them because they are all made password cracking software.
Yeah.
So I asked them, who will be the first one to implement support for the new SHA-3? Aidan won. And you did that in less than 48 hours, right? Yeah. 24 hours or
On
something.
CPU and GPU.
CPU and GPU.
Yeah.
Amusingly, we're having a conversation about that now, see.
Yeah.
GPU-based.
But more questions for you and Dana.
Well, I was wondering, you mentioned rekeying, because if you have the authenticated shield mode, you can sync. My project now is hardest encryption, or my interest, and having everything depending on all the interests.
Yeah,
That's a good thing.
No.
So how would that change the efficiency? Would it still be usable? Do you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah, it's still usable. Huh? So, what is keying, what that costs is. So, that's why the key just costs $1. So you have $1. But yeah, it's stream encryption. So it's not block encryption. So you can do everything with the permutation except block encryption. So blocking stream encryption, basically what you do is you generate a key stream, and bitwise you add the bits to the plain text. In block encryption, there you take a block and you completely transform it. So you get an error propagation. If you want, for instance, let's say you have your hard disk, you encrypt your hard disk, then you modify one bit in the plain text. If you have stream encryption, that will only modify one bit in the ciphertext. So that's maybe not what you want for this. I think in disk encryption, readable block ciphers are very popular because they want to have blocking. So you cannot do block encryption. That's a limit. I think that's the limit.
Can you get it after the funding?
You can get that, of course.
And then we add those into a company. This sector is that big. This sector doesn't have to be that big.
No. No, I mean, it's, I think in disk encryption, you see a lot of people want to do block encryption.
More questions? James?
Just going back to the making it slower.
Yeah.
So based on your description, that sounds like it would make a straight replacement for the current, like if we're using password-based key derived functions for, I guess they're usually based on SHA-1 and however number of rounds. Is that in effect what you were saying with that's a direct replacement? Or?
I don't know. So this was just an idea. So this was just to show you can make it as slow as you want. That's all. It's not, there's no, so I think also NIST still has to start working on the standard. So we'll, I guess they will contact us and we'll see with NIST.
No. Also, one of the things that appeared in the like first couple of minutes more or less on the announcement was the simple question: who will be the first person or company organization that will now do media reports advising people to use SHA-3 to hash their password without mentioning any kind of sorting or key derivation functions or anything else. And we saw the first article appearing for just 3 weeks ago. Then there was suddenly a blog post, somebody was saying that, well, now everybody should be hashing their passwords with SHA-3. And
NIST, they have in their announcement of SHA-3, they have said there's in fact no problem with SHA-3. And I agree. So there's, in the beginning, so in 2005, 2006, there was the idea that SHA-2 is really not looking very good, but in the meanwhile, these attacks have not really materialized, and it looks like SHA-2 is still secure. And NIST says that too, and they see SHA-3 more like something that can be, it doesn't have to be now overnight everybody goes to SHA-3, and I fully, so you can, if you have a new application, if you have a new platform where you have no legacy or something, then it's probably a good idea to go directly to SHA-3, but for existing systems, SHA-2 is fine. Fully
But MD5 is.
MD5 is not. Yeah, but they should have migrated away from MD5. They should have never adopted MD5 in the first place. That's my opinion. They should take it separately. That wasn't the same. But MD5, they should have migrated away from that 15 years ago. And SHA-1, yeah, okay. Because SHA-1, there has been a number of papers that said we can generate a SHA-1 collision in 2 to the power 60 efforts, 2 to the power 65. And they did the effort. They started it, but it was in fact aborted. Nothing came out of it. So it turns out to be more difficult than what they thought. So it would be nice if they could produce a SHA-1 collision. But it doesn't seem like this is going to happen. So even though SHA-1 is theoretically broken, I don't know, there's no really tangible proof of a real attack.
Okay, so I would like to thank Colin? Yeah?
So you say there haven't been any attacks on SHA-2 in the past few years. Do you think that in fact there haven't been any attacks, or just that the people who've done the attacks have published them?
No, I know some people working on it. So yeah, there's a number of people that almost full-time are trying to improve their attacks in SHA-2. So there have been advances, but I think it's 64 rounds and they're now at 24 rounds. And that's really a big gap. The problem of this ARX is that it looks secure, but basically if you try to attack, it's just difficult to see what's going on. And it's kind of security by experience. So it's very hard to analyze. And that means that, in fact, there can still be progress for years and it can gradually improve, while for attacks, typically after 4 or 5 rounds, you hit a wall. And you can describe them all, and it's related to this propagation. So that's my opinion. If you ask someone who is ARX oriented, they will maybe see something. So it's always